2 more panelists to join us. But while we do, I just want to say thank you for making the time to be here, for your presence, especially on this very hot, warm day. I feel like we skipped spring. And so tapping into kind of the environment and our sensation and the climate makes some of the topics that we'll talk about today unavoidable and inevitable for us not to embody and experience. But to honor our time, I'll go ahead and begin first by welcoming you and introducing myself briefly before stating the land acknowledgement and saying a little bit about the Environmental Justice Initiative and the common good. So my name is Jessica Sihan Fernandez, and I'm an assistant professor in the Ethnic Studies Department here at Santa Clara University. And I have a background in community organizing, and so I always try to find ways of organizing in various spaces that I am a part of and in community with. And so certainly bringing the community into the university is part of that effort. And so with that, I'll go ahead and start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Santa Clara University sits on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone and Muwekma Ohlone people, who were displaced and exploited at the Mission Santa Clara. We also recognize the continuing presence and leadership of the Muwekma Ohlone people and the opportunity to work with them in solidarity and towards restorative justice. Let us take a moment of silence to pay respect to their elders and to all Ohlone people, the past and the present. And in honor of life and presence, I also want to invite you to a moment of silence in honoring the life of a dear colleague, Michelle Beanzos, who passed away. We honor life. Life is precious. And so it is in that spirit and in that intention that I hold a few moments to honor her as well. Thank you. And now for a little bit about the Environmental Justice Initiative and the common good. It provides training, resources, and networking opportunities that foster community-driven research for social and environmental justice here at Santa Clara University, in Northern California, and across the Jesuit network of higher education institutions. We conduct research with community partners on food and climate justice, water and climate justice, and in our law and advocacy lab. And we train other faculty members to teach and to do research on environmental justice and integral ecology in our summer workshops. Tonight's event is part of the initiative's Youth and Environmental Justice Project, which was launched this year. The Youth and Environmental Justice Project supports community organizations and grassroots efforts and youth center programming, as well as school and after-school learning spaces that foster the sociopolitical development and leadership of young people at the front lines of climate and environmental justice efforts. It recognizes youth as having agency and voice in expressing their environmental concerns and leading solutions to develop movements for climate action, which is part of what we will see featured in today's conversation. Our event this evening is grounded and anchored in these intentions and on building and fostering environmental justice and climate action work. We are radically imagining a world where we can all thrive in relationality with all things being and non-being. And so it is in that intention and spirit of care and commitment that I would now like to invite our Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, Jean Daniel Press to offer some remarks before we move into our conversation.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for doing this event. Thank you, panelists. I'm very honored to be here. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, but I have been a professor of environmental studies for over 30 years. And so I was about the age of the panelists when I started working on environmental issues. And much of the talk back then was about conservation, habitat, species, wild places. And much of that talk was oddly lacking in people. Lots about plants and rocks and critters, but not so much about people. And by the time I was your age, we had had some successful experiences reducing pollution, mostly air and water pollution. When I was growing up near Lake Michigan, we'd go to the lake, and because of all the phosphates that were going into the Great Lakes, there would be eutrophication, and you might go to the lake, and there might be a drift of dead fish up on the lake, and kind of made you think about whether you wanted to go swimming there. But again, there was some progress. So at that age that I was starting out, a newish issue was on the horizon, and that was toxics. People were talking about toxics at the time, and they meant toxic waste, they meant pesticides, they meant herbicides. Yes, Silent Spring had been nominally about DDT, but toxic dumping was really something that we were talking about in the late 70s and early 80s. So an earlier environmental movement against pollution imagined that everyone was equally affected by pollution. But activists of color working with the United Church of Christ and many others drew attention to how much more of the toxic waste burden was being borne by poorer communities of color. And that's when, in a mass way, an environmental justice movement in the United States was born. Climate was not in the discussion, was not there, it was absent from that discussion. At least, it was absent at least until this especially hot summer with wildfires in 1988. And that, back then we called it the greenhouse effect. Remember that, Leslie? The greenhouse effect. And I remember so many people rolling their eyes at me when I talked about it. Oh, God, there's an environmental guy again. Many Americans could support working against toxics, water and air pollution, but the greenhouse effect, it's too abstract, too slow-moving, too expensive to fix. So the rest of us continued to teach, research, and mobilize. And along the way, the greenhouse effect became global warming, and then global warming became climate change, where we are today. Now, who do you think were our earliest, strongest allies and activists combating climate change and raising awareness? One guess, young people. They seemed to grasp and accept the science faster, more intuitively, and with more care and passion than their elders. And today, youth activists, some as young as elementary school children, are most consistently, most persistently at the forefront of climate activism. However, unlike the 1980s, the early 1980s, your activism is not aimed against some abstract future disaster or threat. You're experiencing climate change here, now, everywhere. You have a different relationship to this threat than I did at your age. So, I'm left thinking, again, harkening back to when I was coming up, we were a little pissed off at the generation before us, thinking that they had screwed things up a lot and left us with a big mess. Now that I'm older and uglier, I think about how every generation both gives and takes from its children. It gives to its children, but it also takes from its children. And as a parent, as the elders, we hope that the balance is in the favor of giving, but we're not so sure. I think your generation will be a giving one, and I have enormous faith in you. So thank you for being here. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Dean Press, and to all who have contributed to make this event possible, most certainly my colleagues with the Environmental Justice Initiative, Drs. Chad Raphael, Chris Bacon, Iris Stewart-Frey, as well as Maria Eugenia Flores, and of course to our panelists who are joining us today. And so with that intention, I would like to say just a few remarks about our panelists, sharing a little bit about their bios featured in the next slide before we move into a conversation with the film director who will be joining us really briefly as she's limited in her capacities to join us given her work remotely. So Emily Cohen Ibanez is a Latinx filmmaker based in Oakland. Her film work spurs lyricism and social activism advocating for labor and environmental justice, and she is the director of the film whose clips we'll be viewing today, Fruits of Labor. We have Kayla Ochoa is a young organizer in the Bay Area with Communities for a Better Environment, an organization founded many decades ago in 1978 to build and support environmental health and justice impacting communities and to help build sustainable environments. We have Citlali Orozco, a youth engagement fellow with the Hope Collaborative, which brings together a coalition of public agencies, community-based organizations, and communities to build leadership to work together to pursue a vision for a healthier Oakland. And then we have Amaya Dorman-McKenzie and Ariela Lara, who are student activists and organizers with the Sunrise Movement chapter in Berkeley. And they have been actively involved in leading the Green New Deal in the school program since 2023. And then lastly, we have Najiha Al-Asmar as an education program manager with Climate Resilient Communities in Palo Alto, a community-based organization empowering community voices to implement equitable climate solutions for unity, resilience, and justice. And so with that, we'll move into our first set of questions with film director Emily Cohen Ibanez, who will help us anchor this documentary in our conversation. So thank you, Emily, so much for joining us wherever you are.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to Santa Clara University. I thought I was coming on at 7, so I really have just 5 to 10 minutes to speak with you. So I'm at another event that I have to go on and present. So I'm sorry there was some miscommunication. I thought my start time was 7, but it's such a pleasure. Thank you for coming to see the film. I'm speaking from East Oakland. We're at a community event right now, and Ashley, who's the protagonist of the film, is working with me on this community event as well. So she might be able to pop in and say hi. But yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Emily. Maybe before you sign off, one question is, what inspired you to create the film in the ways that you did? And what are some themes and topics that are central to the story of Ashley as featured in Fruits of Labor?
Yes, so, I started, I knew Ashley for many years, since she was 15 years old, doing arts community work with children of farm working families in Watsonville, California. And after the 2016 election, there was an uptick of ICE raids in the community, and I saw that many of the adults who were undocumented feared to go to work, and so children who were born in the U.S., like Ashley, children of farm workers were taking their place. And children have worked in the field since the time of slavery in the United States. It's the one of the areas of labor that does not have the same work protections for children and workers in general. So seeing that, and Ashley going into her last year of high school, I approached her about making this film. And really, there's a lot of wonderful films about farm work and activism. But sometimes, I also worked as a video journalist, and folks of color become stand-in for social problems, but we often are not allowed to our full personhood or come to the fore in a film. So coming of age stories, Fruits of Labor really is a coming of age story. And this is a classic American genre that is generally afforded to white boys and rarely to women of color, and especially working women. So I wanted to, Ashley's such a dynamic young woman, and she continues to be so, and she works with me on my other film projects as well, now behind the scenes. She was just, I think that one of the big secrets of documentary filmmaking is actually casting, and when you meet someone who is just lights up the screen, and her family, and I hope when you watch the film that you feel the love, and that love continues. We're doing community work right now for a short film that I made called Soul in the Garden, with a formerly incarcerated woman who heals through gardening, and all of Ashley's family's here, and we're with the community, and it's a really beautiful event. So the food justice work continues, and Fruits of Labor is one of those projects that is a contribution to a much larger activist movement that you have with all your wonderful panelists today.
Thank you very much, Emily, for sharing your motivations and intentions and activist artistic creativity to advance these issues around labor and environmental justice, but also immigrant rights and justice at the various intersections. We appreciate your work and look forward to remaining connected and in community as these movements build. What is the name of your next project? That'll be my last question.
Well, you can see the film that we're screening with the community right now is called Soul in the Garden. It's freely available at Time Magazine online. Also, it's been broadcasting with PBS. And we are on an impact campaign right now with the community, working with communities that are impacted by food insecurity and mass incarceration. We're also screening and doing events in prisons, but you can see that online. And then I'm in the process of making a film in Colombia. So there's two film projects. One's called Orchid, where the orchid is the main character, and you get to meet ex-combatants to indigenous guardians of natural regions in Colombia, to biologists. So you really get to see a whole network of people working in conservation with the orchid as the main character. And so yes, those are the projects. You can follow the work that I do on my Instagram account is Reversa Films. So REVERSA Films, and keep updated there. But I would love for us to stay in contact, and because we're all in community here, and I really appreciate the love for the film, and that you will all be in discussion, and that you're doing this work. And really quickly, before we go, because I have to go, that's Ashley.
Right on.
We're doing real life activism work out here.
Yes. Okay, so I gotta go. She's pulling me away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you for joining us, and Ashley as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and play the first out of the 4 set of clips of the documentary Fruits of Labor so that we can move into a conversation with our panelists this evening. Thank you.
Empecé a trabajar a los 15 años en los campos en la costa de California, en donde nací. Vengo de una familia mexicana de curanderas, healers. Cultivamos nuestra propia comida y ofrecemos las primeras frutas a la divinidad. Mi cuerpo huele a fresa y trabajo, me levanto. Vivo con mis tres hermanos y mi mamá en esta casa, donde 12 familias compartimos un mismo baño. ¿Por qué tienes chile aquí?
Y ya no come. Dale, para que comas algo. Sí, correcto.
Bien. Are you gonna shower first? I will shower first. Me. Are you gonna shower too?
Ándale, paso.
Hurry up. Todavía no. Mi nombre es Ashley. Todos nuestros nombres empiezan con Ash. Mi mamá dice que Ash simboliza un prado de árboles, con raíces que establecen mi familia aquí en los Estados Unidos. Is the woman used to rape? College, she's still gonna want me to. Did he do the homework tomorrow? English?
Good morning. Our yearbooks are in, and congratulations to our Wildcat softball team. You know what? Those softball girls have really demonstrated if you work hard, you can get to your dreams. Dream big and work hard.
What's important to know is that when FDR passed the original New Deal in the 1930s, it protected many American workers. However, it's also important for you to know that the New Deal of the 1930s also excluded the protections for agricultural workers and domestic workers. So this is what that means. It means that it completely perpetuated the exclusion of descendants of enslaved people for economic gains of the landowners. Right, so basically black and brown people were essentially left out of getting worker protection in the United States. That's why we have so many people in our community and even your classmates who work in the fields, because agricultural labor is the only labor in the United States where children as young as 12 years old can still legally work unlimited hours because they're not protected.
So that's clip number 1, and then we'll move into a dialogue and conversation. So the first question I'll pose to our panelists is, what is your story? And how did you come into activism or organizing for environmental justice at the intersections? What identities or lived experiences have informed your work as organizers and activists?
I'll start us off. Hello everyone, my name is Ariela. I want to say that community is like the foundation of my work, and I have grown up since I was 8, just remembering me and my mom making tamales and going around the community and handing them out, and that's how we also made a living. And with that, with kind of grounding myself in that community, I realized that there was just so much care in this community, in our neighborhoods, with brown and black, like students and families, teachers, workers. We all kind of had this like level of just community that is irreplaceable and is the epitome of care. And come August 2020, I remember kind of just being all like, we were coming back from our trip to Mexico, where we always go to this pueblo in Oaxaca, and is another one of my favorite places to be and surround myself in community. And I was getting ready for school, as one does, and frantically throwing on clothes, brushing my teeth, and all of a sudden I opened my eyes to this bright orange sky. and I'm shocked, and I am just filled with like confusion. And I was around like 12 years old at the time, and me and my mom, I was just like, we were getting ready for school still, we were getting from work, and I remember asking, do we really have to go to school today? Do we really have to go to work today? Like, the outside just looks so scary. But a day of no work, a day of no school means money being taken out of the paycheck, means school, like, missing days is not good for test scores and all of this. And I was then hit with this just realization that the climate crisis isn't linear, it's intersectional. It hits Black and brown communities the most. It hits our neighborhoods that are low income the most. It hits our low income schools that are underfunded the most. And on our way to work and on our way to school on the bus, I remember seeing people's faces, and it's not the usual buenos dias. This time you could see the despair in people's faces and the concern that we're consuming this toxic air that is filling our lungs with just chemicals that no human being should be having in their bodies, and it leads to health effects such as asthma and cancer. And then kind of leading from there, at 14, I joined Somos Sunrise, which is a Latina constituency within the Sunrise Movement that allowed me to really understand how intersectional it is that we're hitting race and class in our climate conversations, that we're building a multiracial cross-class movement to ensure that our most vulnerable communities are uplifted in the face of the climate crisis. Yeah.
Well, I think that my sort of beginning to activism and coming into the environmental justice movement similarly began with the smoke, I would say. Before that, it wasn't real in the same way. Coming from fire country, you know, having a smoke season, that's something, and droughts as well before that. Definitely something that informed my early life and something that I always worried about. I think something that Dean Daniel was saying about how it started as sort of a care of plants and animals. I think I picked up a lot on that growing up, and it mattered to me. It mattered to me that the animals were okay and that the plants were okay when I was little. And then as I grew and I developed a more like holistic sense of the world, and I started to like open my eyes and see the news especially, and I would see like these devastating disasters that were hitting people, not just animals. That definitely brought home like a different perspective, and that's where it became like not just in like climate change, you know, and not just climate change activism, but like environmental justice, like intersectional activism, like you were saying. And then also coming from like a land that doesn't, it was taken. I think there's a moment for me that's very rooted in like learning. When I was in 4th grade, that was the first time that I was introduced to the concept of the gold rush, not the concept, the historical event of the gold rush, and especially in my area, in the Bay, where I grew up. I'd never been connected to my land before that, and it was really an introduction into the like history of colonialism in this country, and it devastated me. Like to this day, I can like feel that betrayal that I really felt in that classroom, realizing that this land was taken from people and then like destroyed in a way that is irreplaceable and that I will be dealing with for the rest of my life. And I think that sort of seeded a lot of anger for me deep down, but also knowing that it was like that created a lot of hope. And I look for that around me, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kayla Yushoa. I'm a descendant of a long lineage of Black women from Brazil, descendant of slaves. So I mention that because in the traditional historiography of the environmental justice movement in the United States, it's really portrayed as coming out of the civil rights movement, civil rights history. But there's something called the long environmental justice movement, which really goes back to the onset of colonization of the Americas and chattel slavery many, many centuries ago. And for me, you know, this is ancestral work. That's my ancestral duty that I inherited. So I stepped into that long lineage of work. A few years ago, I had long been an environmentalist as a young person, but it wasn't until I went to university at Northwestern and encountered very early on one of my political mentors, Antonio Lopez, from the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, who had introduced me to environmental justice as a political framework and orientation to understand the world. And all of a sudden I understood why my ancestors traveled 10,000 miles from Goiânia, Brazil to the Mission District in San Francisco. I had understood why I was displaced from the mission, right? And it's why so many of my family members moved to Richmond, California, where there's a 3,000-acre Chevron refinery. I understood why my family members were deported and why my dad was incarcerated, and it all made sense. It's really a intersectional transformative framework and understanding of how violence is created and manifests. And in university, I did my Mellon Mays undergraduate fellowship research on the intersection of environmental justice and abolition. I worked with incarcerated people at Cook County Jail in Chicago to understand how they're conceptualizing environmental justice and resisting from the inside. That was the greatest honor of my life thus far, and then I came back home to do refinery work, and you know the reason why I stay in this work is because of you two. To my right, beautiful, brilliant young people who speak with power and poise, you know, against the systems of harm and violence and power that have brought us to this moment of a pure climate crisis.
Wow, I'm inspired by everyone's stories so far. My name is Najia Alismar. I'm a mixed child. My parents met in San Francisco. My dad was Lebanese, my mom is Salvadorian. So I grew up in a very, very interesting household. But one thing that always brought us together was food. Both of my parents were really good cooks. My dad would cook traditional Lebanese food, and my mom Salvadorian food, and I don't know, it just always brought us together, and my friend groups were always diverse too. And in learning about, you know, the history of segregation and racism, I kind of was just in shock, I remember, and not understanding because I was so embellished. I grew up in San Francisco part of my life, and it was so diverse there, but then seeing all these lines that were created by whatever you want to call it, control and power. I started seeing things, and I was on a plane when I was 6 years old by myself. I went to El Salvador to spend the summer with my grandparents. My mom wanted me to speak Spanish fluently, and she wanted a break. So I remember being there and just loving El Salvador. It's green, it's lush, the people, the food, the environment, it's different. People are slower, and as I immersed myself in that culture, I realized that this is my roots. My grandpa would always tell me, you should go to school here, and you know, learn to be a doctor here, whatever you want to do, you know. And I just remember him telling me that. But then I would go pretty often, and when I was about 15, I went back, and I saw the country changing. We had lost our currency. It went from colones to the dollar. And since then, I saw franchises just moving in, more fast food, more economy. And that opened my eyes. My mom's friend came to visit us, and we were all there, and I remember her saying, "Whoa, there's a Wendy's here," and she got really excited, and I was sad about it, because I was like, oh wow, the colonization is continuing. So that kind of sparked my interest in this kind of idea of activism and thinking about how we could, reintegrate ways of whole foods. I've always loved food, so coming back, I went to university at UC Irvine, and there was a sustainability English course that I took that was super fascinating, and I learned about the food systems there and how it harms people and planet, and especially the larger food systems. And that got me thinking too, like food is life, it's energy, it's how we sustain ourselves. So I wanted to be involved in that. I wanted to be a part of the food system and creating, regenerative areas within our communities, especially our communities of color, since I identify with that. And I was at Fresh Approach, which is located in East Palo Alto, for about 7 years, creating sustainable systems. We had a greenhouse and localized community gardens, and I was doing installations there, and I just felt this movement slowly happening, and I realized that good things take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And people were gathering. We were sharing ideas and recipes and modes of growing things better and fuller and creating heirlooms out of varieties. And then I realized that I wanted to do more. I felt like beyond food, the environment is so intersectional. And it really inspired me to kind of shift gears and go to climate resilient communities to really empower youth and frontline communities of color to take action and create a culture around nurturing each other and understanding that nature is nurturing. She's not harmful. I understand that climate change has been happening before humans, right? It's been around, it's just humans have hit the fast forward button and they don't know how to make it stop. So, all in all, I do feel that there's a way to stop fast forwarding and hit play and let Mother Nature take her course. She's cleansing herself every day. And I feel as humans, it's our responsibility to nurture with her. And I'm just hoping to inspire people to do the same.
Hi everyone, I'm Seetla Lee. What really brought me into being involved in activism and organizing has really been an act of survival because of my lineage and where my people are from. I think that from a young age, especially as a woman of color, we're forced to become activists and become storytellers and learn about the harm that colonization has done to our communities. And from a young age, I learned the work that my grandparents have been involved in. They're medicine workers, curanderas, and so I feel very directly connected to that work. I think that this is my first time up here, or in a panel, so I am feeling a little nervous right now. But yeah, I think that really started doing this work because of just the conversations I had with my grandma and my mom, who have been land stewards since they were really little. And I started to understand the displacement of my indigenous ancestry, who had to leave the state of Michoacan, and come to the United States because of the United States buying a lot of the land from people in Michoacan. And so I learned that history from a really young age. And when I was 18, I started to learn more about Brazil and what's happening in the Amazon. And it led me to travel to Brazil and do a whole year fellowship program and study there and work with the Brazilian community in Brazil and learn a lot about the work that they're doing there and how it's so deeply connected to my own history. And today, or now, I'm involved in a fellowship program at Hope Collaborative, where I help run the youth program, and a lot of the work that I do is I support a lot of the youth advocates to continue learning more about what's happening in the world and what's happening in our communities, in particular Oakland right now. And as I continue to travel back home and to Mexico City, I continue to see the rise in just the air quality. It's really, really bad. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Mexico City, but it used to not be like that when I was 15, and it's just completely destroyed. So it's really sad to go back and seeing like my family struggling with asthma and having like respiratory problems and having to leave their city and go to other parts of the country. So yeah, that's why I'm continuing to do this work.
Thank you all for sharing the story of how you came to be into your organizing and activism and really honoring the roots and the heritage and the importance of community. We'll go ahead and watch our second clip, and then we'll see where we are. I feel like a conversation sometimes a lot more nourishing and generative, but we will flow with what comes our way. So we'll go ahead and play the second video, please.
¿Cómo desearía tener una vida menos difícil y solo preocuparme de las cosas que se preocupan las chicas de mi edad?
What did you say when you saw my nails done? You actually thought you wouldn't, I didn't think you wouldn't notice. Is that, did you kind of figure though?
What?
That I was doing my nails?
Nah, I was like...
Because you know how I lag.
I thought you were scared.
Because you know how I lag? I was like, he's either going to think I'm with a friend or I'm doing something else. Because I went to the bank and now I was coming back home and I was like, and I was just looking at my nails. I was like, I haven't done my nails in so many years. I'm going to go and do them. And then I was sleeping and then I couldn't scratch my back and then I regretted it. You think reincarnation is for real?
No.
Why? What if it is? What if you actually... Think about it. Like what happens when
you die and you come back something else?
Yeah.
You die is like when you're asleep.
Then what explains ghost, Julio? I'll have to wake up early tomorrow.
Yeah?
Look, you didn't like it?
presidente Trump amenaza con deportar a millones de indocumentados. En Twitter, el mandatario dice que el proceso comenzaría tan pronto como la próxima semana.
Massive deportation rates.
The administration has been pushing the Department of Homeland Security to do something like this for a number of months.
ICE's presence is also being felt in neighboring communities. There were raids in Watsonville this morning, last night in Santa Cruz. All as President Trump today doubled down on his promise to crack down on dangerous gangs in sanctuary cities that he says protect them.
Immigration and Custom Enforcement agents conducting raids on the Central Coast this week.
Abra la puerta. Si la abre, no conteste preguntas.
ICE agents told Watsonville police the raids in Watsonville will continue over the next 6 days.
I was wondering if I could have like a check-in on how I'm doing towards my graduation.
Sure. Let me go ahead and get the pink sheet. Well, first we can take a look at your transcript. You still have to meet these requirements. So you need 5 credits in English, 5 for PE, and 5 for econ. And then if we take a look at your attendance, how's your attendance?
I had 36 cuts, and I did more like 40 something. I might not graduate. I'm a scared turtle who wants to hide in a shell. I don't want my mom to think I gave up, but the truth is, I am giving up. I barely even go to school.
Es que necesitas descansar, Ashley, no descansa nada.
Bueno, apenas son las 7:44. Esta tarde. Nomás tengo que estar ahí a las 8:40. Porque me van a poner a hacer algo nuevo. Me tienen que enseñar. No sé dónde voy a ir. Creo que las espinacas.
Para empacar.
Tengo hambre.
Pero ya ahorita que como.
Y en vez de que necesito ibuprofen.
Pues ahorita
me da la cabeza mejor. A lo mejor porque no he dormido.
Por eso.
Si tengo cabeza bien caliente. ¿Le tiéntalo?
Está caliente, si te vayas a enfermar, ya vayas a sacar.
No.
¿Ya te acabaste las uñas, Ashley?
No, me las tuve que cortar.
Ay, Dios mío.
Para el trabajo.
Oh, ¿no te dejaban las uñotas?
Las tuve que cortar ahí. Pensaron que esta era mi uña.
¿Por qué?
No me las dejaron.
¿Qué te dijeron?
Me dije, sí, no, están pintadas.
¿Qué dijo?
Dijo, ok. Ya nomás uso los guantes y ya. Para que no me mire. Ice keeps our bodies moving in linear motion, sucking out life and filling the dead space with fear and longing. The production line at the strawberry moves in one line, a singular motion. The frozen strawberries move down la banda desde el congelador hasta otro congelador. We stand in between the machines, picking out little pieces of ice and strawberries. The factories don't have enough workers, so they have to hire us kids. As a little kid, my mom was always the first person I saw in the morning and the last person I saw before I went to sleep. My mom kept the house clean and made everyone dinner. My mom often said, "Aprende a hacer comida para que te puedas casar." When teaching me to cook tortillas, she said, "Once you get the tortilla to puff up on the stove, you'll be ready to marry." My mom got a divorce. My mom said to me, "Nosotros tenemos los pantalones de la casa." For that reason, I went to work. My brother, on the other hand, he was considered un varón. The expectation was for him to relax and not to take responsibility. He was really chiqueado. Varones get away with everything.
Thank you. And so now I'll move into another round of questions for our panelists, and then we'll open up the floor to audience questions. So we only got to see 2 clips out of the 4, and that's because I really would like to hear more from our panelists and also from you as audience members and those joining us virtually. So the question for the panelists is, how would you describe your current environmental justice and climate action, intersectional justice work? And what supports and challenges it? And what words of wisdom do you have for young organizers and organizers today? And you can choose any one of the 3.
So as we watched this video clip, I was just kind of getting grounded and also slightly emotional because I'm watching this and we can see that these are the realities of so many people, so many families, so many students. And I get into this headspace of just like sometimes like despair because of how just scary it can all be to know that this is our reality. Because when you hear about issues such as housing, and we're seeing the market get higher, and we're seeing people are not able to afford to live in the Bay Area, or when we're thinking about healthcare and how many people are not getting the treatments or the resources to secure themselves with a way of medication and a way of receiving resources to ensure that they're not sick. And we're seeing so many different issues where people are not able to sustain themselves in this country. We come here and we hear about the idea of this American dream, and we're seeing how the system that we live in does not abide to this dream. In fact, so many communities, Black, Brown, Latina communities, are suffering so much because of how they're unable to get a living wage, how their workplaces are very excruciating and doesn't allow them to go to school. And I think about this so often because when all these issues come into play, the climate crisis will only exacerbate things. When we think of housing, our homes get flooded and people are getting displaced. And then we're seeing when fires come into neighborhoods, people get evictions. And when gentrification takes a rise, people don't know where to go and are told that they will find housing, but in fact they can't afford that housing. And the climate crisis will continue to get worse. And we're seeing that Biden and Harris and their administration have approved more oil and gas projects, more than any administration. And it does not add up to the science. The science says that we have 6 years left. And we're still approving oil and gas projects. And sure, we have the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, we have the American Climate Corps, we have these big wins that have been passed into office, but that's simply not enough. It's simply not enough to help the various communities that still need to sustain themselves, that still need to be able to go to school, and also at the same time not have to breathe in this toxic air. When I was going to school, I remember in my environmental class, we were being told about our carbon footprint. We were being fed the greenwashing praise of recycling, composting. And I remember thinking to myself, why are they talking about this, but not the fossil fuels that are placed in our neighborhoods? Why are they not having the conversations about us getting our eyes super teary-eyed in water because of the smoke? Why are they not talking about the air quality? Why are they not talking about the recent floods that hit throughout California, across California, and flooded so many homes? Why is this not happening in our classrooms? When I think about the vision of what we should have in our world, I think about disaster preparation plans. I think about green union jobs. I think about the end of the fossil fuel era, because that should be our reality. We should have policies that declare the climate emergency, that really testify to the reality in which we are living in. And as of recently, I am coming back from an action where I had to put my body on the line. I got arrested with 5 other Sunrise people because we put our bodies on the lines. We told Harris, you supported a Green New Deal in 2019, but where are you now? And I'm going to continue being on the front lines and raising my voice, because the climate crisis is severe and it's only going to get worse. And we have to raise our voices, we have to tell our stories, because we need to ensure that our government is listening to us and uplifting the most vulnerable communities. And so when I see myself in this work, I make sure that I keep myself grounded in these stories, that I remind myself that there are so many people right now that have and are asking for help. And I also will say that in this work, I'm not doing it alone. I'm doing it with hundreds and hundreds of youth across the country. I'm doing it with people right by my side in this panel. And without the solidarity and without knowing that I'm in this fight with other people, I wouldn't be here today. And that's why community is just so pivotal to this work. And that's my wisdom that I can offer, is that make sure that when we're having these conversations, or when you're thinking of organizing in your communities, in your schools, in your neighborhoods, that you're doing it with people by your side. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was really beautiful. And I would like to further elaborate on the work of Sunrise. I don't know, does anyone here know about the Sunrise movement at all? Yes. Okay, cool. Yes. So you both are from the Sunrise movement, and as Ariella was saying, some of the main goals of the Green New Deal, which is building on the very outdated idea of the original New Deal, and essentially with that idea of the green jobs, the union green jobs, and a fossil fuel free economy, and I'm forgetting the last one. Is that I covered all? Preparation for disasters. And then specifically the program that I'm working on is RLS National, and focuses on national legislation, and I'm focusing on my school district and local legislation. So I'm especially working on the Green New Deal for schools, and what that looks like is climate disaster readiness plans, free and healthy lunches, climate curriculum, pathways to green jobs, and the one that I always forget because it's different every time, so I'll think of it. But what I love about my work and what I think really, there's one moment that really grounds me in my work at Sunrise, and that was earlier this year I went to DC as part of the opening of the Green New Deal for schools as a national piece of legislation. I was there in the background of the panel with Jamal Bowman, and Senator Ed Markey and Senator Jamal Bowman. Yes, and being in that background and seeing those people that were putting in national legislation around the thing that I'm fighting for locally it's so incredible to see these levels of change, and that's what Sunrise really focuses on, is like levels of change, seeing it at like a community level and like a state level and then a national level, and of legislation specifically, but in like a community-driven grassroots organizing style. So not just coming out of the mouths of people that have been elected from, their little places, and it's from the people. We're working from the people to lift up those who support our views, the people on the ground, and I think that grounds me, that moment of seeing what it would mean to have that baseline of education being a foundation for our country and our learning systems. That's not something that's nationalized. There's no one way to do school in this country. There's no foundation. It's all by states, which makes it really difficult to nationalize a climate curriculum specifically. There are places that are teaching very, very limited versions of climate education, to put it nicely. And something that Sunrise is working to do is get as many districts as possible around the country to create like pass this Green New Deal for schools, and then put that as like a baseline, a base level, get it passed nationally as a baseline for around the country, and then have that be a foundation for the Green New Deal as a whole, because education is so vital to our futures, all of our futures. We wouldn't know about it if we didn't learn about it. So, it's incredibly important. That's where I see myself, especially in this movement. And yeah, that's what I'd say.
So I'll offer my diagnosis of the problems and challenges of the movement, and I think a huge one that I deal with, being a visibly young person myself, and also someone who works with even younger people, is that youth leadership is largely tokenized, right? Young people are on posters, they're brought into programs, they're quoted for grants, but they're not part of democratic decision making in actual spaces where it would have transformative impact. That's why I'm so proud of, I'm going to continue to say it, the young high schoolers on my right who are actually part of decision making and putting their bodies on the line. As you said, that's not something to take lightly, especially as a young person in high school navigating so much. And with that, my piece of wisdom I can offer is that everyone has a gift that they have to critically and strategically cultivate for the movement. Not everyone is going to have the same gift.
So with the young people I work with, I really encourage them to understand what is your role in transformative social change and how do you cultivate that. I'll offer myself as an example. So my role is being an educator and an agitator. I work in Richmond, California, which is a predominantly Latinx and Black community. It's a working class, low income community. The median income is $55,000, which I know everyone in this room knows is not enough money for the Bay Area, right? It has a huge population of monolingual Spanish speakers, many of which who are actually under 18. It's a receiving community for migrants who are seeking refuge not just from the south of the United States, right? From the first and second wave of the great migration of Black folks, but also the global south. So places like Honduras, places like Brazil, places like El Salvador, places like Mexico, people who are seeking refuge from the climate crisis, seeking a better life for their families and for their kids, and they're met with a massive 3,000-acre refinery spewing out toxins for more than a century that has caused astronomical asthmatic rates among Black and brown children in particular, particularly Black children who have almost 3 times higher asthma rates than their counterparts. So we're dealing with premature death, manufactured precarity that's not normal or natural or inevitable. And at every stage of the extractive fossil fuel industry, we're on the latter end of refining the crude oil, right? So it can be a product for your cars, for airplanes to take you places. But at the point of initial extraction, in a place like Ecuador, you see indigenous people are being murdered and decimated. Their land is being decimated. And there's an intimate relationship between indigenous people and their land. You hop over to occupied Palestine and you see the same thing where the Chevron Corporation is enabling and funding decades of occupation and apartheid and the current genocide. People may have heard about all of the oil permits that are going on as we speak. I mean, not only do these corporations cause our death, they actually profit from it and they enjoy that. They jump at it as a financial opportunity. And so this is my role. I bring young people into the center. I want to help them see it for what it is, see how the systems of power intersect. Our work locally in Richmond to financially destabilize Chevron and other bad actors is intimately connected to the global work in the climate justice movement of standing with Black and indigenous people fighting against colonization, apartheid, genocide, murder. This is what the environmental justice and climate justice movement has always been, and this is what it needs to be. And that's my role, that's young people's role. I think young people are incredibly brilliant and astute. I mean, sitting next to high schoolers who can elucidate colonization and capitalism the way that they do these days is miraculous. It'll bring me to tears because young people understand better than anyone where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go, which is a place where we have life-affirming resources for everyone, right? And where the land, the natural world, and the people can thrive, and we're not in a place of constantly fighting to survive.
Continually impressed by everyone's responses. I have a similar vein when wanting to, uplift young people. I work in East Palo Alto. We work, Climate Resilient Communities works with a diverse, frontline communities of color in East Palo Alto, Bellhaven, which is the east side of Menlo Park, also suffering from asthma rates and heart issues and obesity. North Fair Oaks as well. All of these communities primarily reside in food apartheid areas, high traffic areas, and there are frontline communities of color all over the Bay Area. San Jose, Alviso, Seaside, where I live right now, which is a little bit further south. They call it the East Palo Alto of Monterey. And in seeing these communities of color, there is a lot of brilliance. These youth are extremely aware of what's going on. We piloted a youth climate collective last year. It's one of the first projects I initiated with climate resilient communities, and we really just gathered these youth from these communities to expose them to become aware of the different policies and environmental justice organizations that are out there every day doing the work. So what we do with our YCC program is we go out and we go to the forest and we learn about fire management and indigenous controlled fire burning that used to be. We learn about marshland habitats and king tide events. We go out to the sea and we learn about ocean acidification and our bay ecosystems. So I really try to empower them to dive into these communities, dive into these environmental organizations to really see the work. I really encourage each organization to have a representative that's a BIPOC person so that they could see a real life mentor that looks like them, might have similar background as them, because that's huge. The environmental justice movement or environmentalism has been predominantly white facing. So to see a brown or black person in leadership is huge for these kids. So that's one thing that I make sure that happens. And then I have them immerse themselves, have fun with it, but also understand the repercussions of all the damage that has been done. And then the next phase of this program is internships. So they get a taste of all these different organizations doing things, and then we invite them and pay them with internships. So they get to pick an organization of their choice, and then intern for 10 weeks, and hopefully continue to learn and expand and grow. This looks good on their resumes, their CVs, their job applications, wherever they go. It's a chance for them to be representing BIPOC communities and to immerse themselves in the environmental justice movement. Because frontline communities of color are the ones that are really holding the burden of a lot of it. So for them to take action and feel empowered and to be a part of something bigger, I think is huge. So I just want to thank y'all for being here and for being amazing youth leaders. I'm super impressed and eternally grateful.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. For me, I'm really just going to share some words of wisdom, keep it short with you guys. But really, I think it's really important to remember and acknowledge the land that you live on. And I think that can be really where it can start as someone who is young or someone who just wants to join the movement as an adult. To just remember that Indigenous people and Black people have really been the ones who have led this movement for far so long. And we are tired, but also it's also really important to remember that sometimes it will require you to take a step back and listen to Indigenous people, to Black people, to do research, to listen to people that are in Mexico and Palestine, in South Africa, all over the world, and also in your local community, which is really important, but also just in so many places across the world. So if I can really share anything with you today is to really start understanding and doing more research on Indigenous activists who have been, who haven't gotten the visibility that they deserve. Hope Collaborative is actually having a creek cleanup on Saturday, so if everyone wants to come and join our youth who are doing a water campaign right now, and trying to clean up the Diamond District in Oakland, in East Oakland. You guys can join us. Follow our Instagram, and come join us. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And I know we are at our time, and I do want to offer a space maybe for 2 questions, and maybe you all can choose who responds, but maybe we can have one question from the right, one question from the left from our audience. And if there aren't any questions, I'm happy to offer 2 closing quotes as a wrap. Any questions? Reflections? Yes, Rosalia?
I was wondering, because you have, you're talking about how you work at the national level and the levels in different parts of this country. I was wondering how, if you guys have been working with other youths in maybe other countries and other areas, and how you guys have been doing that.
I'll restate the question for folks joining us virtually. So Rosalia asked how you all work at multiple levels, and in which ways do you work transnationally outside of the U.S. as well? Is that right? Thank you.
Yeah. So Sunrise is a movement. Oh, is this on? Yeah. Okay. Sunrise is a movement of like hubs across the country, whether it be New York.
I don't think it's on yet.
Yeah, so Sunrise is basically a movement of youth across the country. So we have hubs in New York, Miami, and we have schools, high schools that are starting their own hubs and are working on different resolutions. But something that we kind of work on in Sunrise is we work on our principles, and one of our principles is to ensure that we are making transformative change. And we do this by like Amaya was saying before, that we kind of want to make sure that we're doing local work, and through the local work, we are able to reach the administration and have federal wins. The American Climate Corps that I mentioned earlier was one of our recent wins. For around 2 to 3 years, we were organizing across the country. We had community hubs that were kind of, doing the organizing, canvassing, tabling, making calls, and hours of just organizing and years of this. And we were fighting for the Civilian Climate Corps, which is now the ACC, which allows thousands and thousands of people to have green jobs. And Biden made this pass recently. And so that is just, that's just a testament to the work of local organizing. And you said something about how broad is it in terms of who we're reaching, and right now it's a national movement, so it's in the United States, and so we're continuing to work on these local levels, and right now we have community resolutions, we have school resolutions, and if you want to learn more, you can come up and ask questions, and I'm happy to connect you with national trainings and the things that we offer and resources that we offer.
I will say that I got connected to Sunrise, and then I got flown out multiple times to places, so it's definitely worth checking out just for travel or community. It's plugging Sunrise here. But yeah, you should definitely come talk to us if you have more questions about where our movement goes.
Thank you very much. Other questions or reflections? We have one question in the middle, and we'll pass you the mic. Thank you.
This is kind of a basic question, but it's just climate changes a lot, right? So how do you keep hope that things can change? Because it seems like we're still going in the wrong direction.
Okay, this is something that I didn't get to say I was actually really hoping that someone would ask. But I I draw a lot of my hope and my strength and my happiness in the kind of movement from 2 places. The first one is kind of related to what my friend down here was saying about connecting to the land and kind of an indigenous perspective on the climate. There's this really great book that I have just started reading called Braiding Sweetgrass, and I haven't gone very far yet, but I noticed that in the first couple of chapters, it really talks about how the land is so there's this woman, and I can't remember her name, but she falls from the sky with these seeds in her hand. And the beautiful moment is that the animals that are on the land, they catch her, and a turtle becomes a place for her to rest in this ocean, I think. And a little marmot goes down all the way to the bottom of the ocean and picks up a handful of dirt and just gives his life to swim all the way down, and then comes back to the surface, sadly dead, but has a little handful of dirt. And these women plants these seeds in the dirt that this little marmot had spent his life to go get, and it creates a forest. And the words that I really love is that she's a visitor, and like any good visitor, she has a gift. And I think there's something to be said about that as like a human, like we're kind of visitors. I mean, we're born here, but we're not permanent here. The earth has been here before us, and it will be here after us. And I always think about like how how thinking of our lives as like a gift, and every breath that we take as a gift, and beyond that, sort of the art that we create as a gift for the world. I love art. I consider myself an artist, and I would say that's the other part that I really like take my happiness from, is the arts, and connecting the arts to this climate movement, giving it not that it doesn't have a soul, but it has more of a soul when you give it art, and you give it song. We have a lot of song at Sunrise, and then like painting and drawing and all of that, just it gives me so much joy, and it's permanent. It's more permanent, and yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing. I just wanted to say, look to your indigenous cosmologies and epistemologies. And what that means, cosmology means a way of understanding the universe, and epistemology means the study of knowledge. Because our people have been here, they are here, and they're in the future. Black people are in the future. Indigenous people are in the future. Get invested in the project of futurity for your people and yourself, right? Because we won't be here forever, but our people will be. That's a promise. And James Baldwin has written a lot, so I suggest reading about the concept of critical hope, right? Not misguided hope, but critical hope. And critical hope means that you might be disillusioned. You know, I myself am 23, not that old, quite disillusioned already. You're in university, I'm sure you're disillusioned every day by your administration and plenty of challenges here. Like, I was a very angry undergraduate student, I will say. But critical hope means that you will cry, you will suffer, you will want to give up, you will feel abandoned, as I have many of times by older people and people around me, and you'll feel confused. But you'll come back, because it's critical hope. It's a belief in your futurity. It's a belief that this is, again, an ancestral inheritance, this work, and your ancestors didn't go through all of that for you to be complicit in your own suffering and the suffering of other people, right? They did that so you could be here. They dreamed you into being, but they didn't know who you were yet. And in the same way, think of what kind of future ancestor do I want to be, right? And I think that's what gets me through each day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I will end with 2 quotes, one from one of the books that was cited by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Action on behalf of life transforms because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal. It is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. And then the second quote by Adrienne Mayer Brown. When I think of climate justice, I think about partnering with the land, partnering with the water, partnering with the air, partnering with the forces of change that our planet represents, not saving it. And so with that, I am so incredibly honored and grateful to have learned and shared and held space with you and with all of you here physically and virtually. Thank you so much for the conversation. None of this dialogue was scripted by any means. We just kind of brought ourselves here with our heart and soul to build community in multiple ways to advance these forms of intersectional environmental justice for decolonization and collective humanized, non-humanized thriving. So thank you so much for allowing me to organize this. Thank you. And we'll be around if you have any questions or want to connect with some of our panelists. Again, thank you.